Welcome to Program Planning, Chapter 1, looking at contemporary issues in human service program planning and administration. Some of the things that we'll cover this chapter are major governmental and other initiatives that have prompted the need for program planning, relationships between the logic model and program planning, which we'll get very accustomed to during this course, how agencies and community-wide networks relate to each other in addressing social problems, steps involved in effectiveness-based program planning, and the elements of programs that are critical to measuring effectiveness. And as I said, this will unfold throughout the entire semester as we begin to look at how to plan programs and some of the initial steps that are useful in doing that. The era of accountability is looking at how our ideas about program planning and performance and outcome measures began to become established in terms of accountable measures. So it's important that we think about ways to measure performance accountability. Human service programs are now embedded in a system of performance accountability. The overriding question being asked by both government and private sectors for funding sources: do human service programs actually work? And if they don't work, why should they continue to be funded? So a lot of these different items and acts that happened at the federal level were aiming to provide accountability and credibility to some of these programs. The Government Performance and Results Act has become a major driver of performance accountability at the federal level. GPRA, as the law is known, requires federal departments and agencies to annually report their performance to the President and Congress. To facilitate this annual reporting, the Executive Branch Management Scorecard ranks federal agencies on several criteria, including how well they've implemented performance accountability and the extent to which performance is linked to budget processes. A second driver of accountability at the federal level is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And this basically represents the formal contracting policies and procedures of the federal government. It requires that all federal service contracts, including human service contracts, be performance-based to the maximum extent possible. And so, again, looking at accountability, are our programs actually working and how do we working? When we're looking at the state and local government levels, two major drivers of performance accountability are the reporting initiative of the Government Accounting Standards Board and the performance measurement requirements imposed by governors and state legislatures. Looking at the Government Accounting Standards Board, it sets financial and reporting standards for state and local governments. It's long advocated that state and local governments adopt performance accountability systems that track and report on the outputs, quality, and outcomes of government programs. It calls its recommended performance accountability system service efforts and accomplishments reporting. So as of 2006, 48 of the 50 states have some form of mandated performance accountability systems. Many of these initiatives also tie performance measures to the budget process. Some 50% of municipal and county governments nationwide have some sort of performance accountability system in place. Private sector funding organizations such as foundations and the United Way have also adopted performance accountability systems. Most nonprofit human service agencies that receive government foundation or United Way funding through grants and contracts have likewise adopted performance accountability systems in order to satisfy the reporting requirements of their funders. So when we're looking at evidence-based practice and evidence-based performance measures and accountability here, evidence is what we refer to as the collection of data around specified variables that define service characteristics and results. And when we talk specifically about evidence-based practice, we're talking about decision-making that's based on evidence from this systematic research. As this relates to designing and monitoring programs and their evaluation, the Urban Institute's evaluability assessment includes evidence required by management can be reliably produced. So again, it's not something that's very ambiguous, but we can reliably and consistently produce that information. It has to be feasible to collect. So again, it's something that's actually able to be collected, something that's part of the natural flow or process of the program and the information that can be observed there. And the management's intended use of the information can realistically be expected to affect performance. Again, it's something that's actually tied to the goals, the purpose, and the actions of the agency or program itself. The logic model, which you may be familiar with, but the purpose is really to help us organize and understand the logical flow or sequence of events that identify program resources. And so again, it gives us a good understanding and helps us to organize and match resources to needs, to quantify the processes of our service that we're offering, to track completion of the process, and to measure our results. So it's a very useful tool, and again, you'll become familiar with it as we develop our program plans for this course. The logic model also depicts the rational flow of addressing a problem and applying a process while maintaining a focus on the purpose of the entire effort. So positive changes in the lives of clients, reducing the size and scope of a problem in a community, providing specific resources, etc. And all of those are specific to the individual program that's being designed and the intent of that program. Okay, so a logic model here, looking at kind of the overview at the top portion of this figure, and then at the bottom kind of going through an example that relates to it. But the inputs, these are the resources and raw materials that are needed or necessary. The process, these are the activities that use inputs to achieve objectives with raw materials. The outputs are the measurements of services provided and completion of all services prescribed. The outcomes are demonstrated benefits to those receiving the services. And the impact, those are the measurable changes occurring in organizations, communities, or systems as a result of services. And as I said, these are specific to the program itself and the program that's being developed. You'll notice here, this is just one example, but resources as inputs here, staff volunteers, money, materials, space, technology, and then the raw materials here are listed as the clients. The process, parent training for abusive and neglecting or neglectful parents. The outputs, the number of training hours provided, number who complete the entire course and receive a certificate. So these are these parents going through this training. And then the outcomes, number of those who completed the course who actually demonstrate improved parenting skills. And then the impact, reduction of reports of abuse and neglect in the community. So again, these would be specific to your program, but I feel like this example helps to shed light on each of the pieces of the logic model. Okay, a community focus. This shifts focus from what an agency is providing to what happens to a community as a result of receiving a particular set of services. Requires planners to determine data elements and information technology support needed to evaluate program effectiveness. It provides evaluation data that can be used for continuous quality improvement. So again, vital to understanding and seeing purpose in what programs are being planned and how they're being utilized. The issue of effectiveness, because we've seen that word, and if you're familiar now in research, it's like, oh, we have to operationalize some of these terms, but let's look here at what we're oftentimes meaning by some of these terms. So efficiency, the volume of service in relation to the cost. So are we spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, but there's relatively little service being offered? Or are we able to maximize and be more efficient in terms of the cost benefits that we see? Effectiveness, these are oftentimes the client outcomes, could be the quality of life changes. But again, these outcomes are a result of receiving specific services. And then how we define program is a pre-arranged set of activities designed to achieve a stated set of goals and objectives. And again, that's a very general definition because as you plug in your actual program or your program plans, obviously the activities will be specific to those things. Okay, when we're looking at effectiveness specifically, one of the things that really ties in is establishing goals and objectives. When we establish these goals and objectives, then we can provide definitions of services to be provided and the results expected. We can categorize client requests for help and direct clients to services that offer the best possibility of meeting their needs. Can associate client data with specific programs and services so that valid and reliable measures are produced. So valid and reliable, is it actually measuring what it's saying that it's going to measure or the intended measurement? And is it something that's consistent over time? Okay, assessing an existing program. So we need to recognize the complexities of social problems and human service programs proactively. So a lot of times when we're assessing an existing program, one of the things is that we're trying to optimize the likelihood of a good fit between services and needs and intended results. Again, it's not just, oh, we've always done it this way, but is this actually working? Is this something that is actually producing or leading towards meeting specific goals that we have? Also, when we assess existing programs, we increase the likelihood that service providers produce results rather than merely hoping that things turn out well for a client. So again, it's trying to find ways to ensure that we're providing the best possible services, cost-effective services, and that our programs are as strong and effective as they can be. So what actually is effectiveness-based program planning? It's a series of steps designed to produce an understanding and definition of the problem to be addressed, to measure client problem type and severity at entry, to provide a relevant intervention, to measure client problem type and severity at exit, to examine selected indicators for follow-up, and to determine short and long-range outcomes. And so again, effectiveness-based program planning is tied directly to how is this program working, how is it functioning, how effective is it at meeting goals, and again, a lot of times that's in line with client outcomes and actually making a difference or an impact in the community. The purpose is specifically of effectiveness-based program planning to provide a basis for continual improvement of services to clients and to provide a common database for clinical and administrative staff for analysis and decision-making about program changes. And again, we're trying to determine if our services are organized programs, do they offer some type of specialized set of services, and what specific defined population. Also, it's designed for clients to come through a common intake point and to be systematically assigned to case managers rather than to specialists. A lot of times when we're looking at program planning and trying to understand and assess programs, we also want to assess diverse populations. So we might want to assess health disparities in the population targeted for services and address disparities in planning for service. Programs a lot of times are designed for specific populations who may be underrepresented and underserved. And so again, it's important that we ensure that we're actually reaching those clients or those intended populations. This also ensures that programs and services are inclusive, culturally competent, and meet the needs of all populations. And so one program may not be able to meet the needs of all populations, but as we start developing programs targeted at specific populations to reduce stigma and disparity, it does start to provide and become more inclusive of all people. Okay. Another thing that we do is what we call a problem analysis, and the use here is to determine if programs develop a clear understanding of type, size, and scope of the problem itself, relevant historical highlights, theory, research findings, etiology, like the beginning of the problem or situation socially that we see. These programs have the foundation for an effective and precisely targeted intervention and have the greatest probability of success. It's also important when we're looking at a problem analysis and trying to understand the problem to recognize that some programs are planned and funded for political or ideological reasons without regard for the facts or the reality of the situation. And so again, that's when it's important for us to look at efficiency, for us to really be able to understand from an empirical evidence-based perspective if the program is actually working, how is it working, and where we can pinpoint areas for improvement and for growth. And the whole goal of all of this in mind is to improve, as we said, quality of life in whatever realm it is for the intended or targeted population. Doing a needs assessment, and we'll unpack all of this again throughout the semester, but needs assessment gives the accuracy and skill in matching needs of individuals experiencing problems to services, and this depends on the problem analysis itself. There are different perspectives on need. Normative need as defined by experts in the field. Perceived need is as seen by those experiencing the need itself. The expressed need is from those who seek out services, and the relative need are needs and resources in one geographic area compared with needs and resources in another. And so it's important to determine the extent to which programs take these perspectives on need into account, because how we define the need will oftentimes define how we answer the service questions and what types of and I'm putting this in air quotes, I know you can't see, but what types of services are actually being offered? Are they matching up with the needs, and which of these needs are they matching with? Selecting a strategy and establishing objectives. This is useful to develop a strategy for reducing or eliminating the problem by meeting the identified needs. You propose one or more program hypotheses, and again, hypotheses are statements about what outcomes are expected if a person with the defined problems receives appropriate service or services. Program hypotheses provide a framework for the development of precisely stated goals, objectives, and activities, and so they're very important to the whole process of designing a program in and of itself. Okay. Also looking at our program design, and as I know I've said it already, but we will be working towards designing a program. So you'll get very familiar with some of these concepts. This is just an introductory piece to this, but the purpose of the program design is to put together the service or combination of services that appears to have the best possible chance of achieving the program's objectives. Program design involves determining the resources needed to address the needs of clients and the ways in which resources will be organized. If program design is consolidated as casework, it is difficult, if not impossible, to examine program effectiveness and to modify program design in the interest of improving services to clients. Okay, looking at program design, when we're assessing the level of precision achieved in specifying the elements of your program design, these are some of the things that will be considered. Identifying client problems and needs, data collection or data collection, however you choose to pronounce it, severity of problem or need, service tasks, service methods, service completion, measuring long-term effects, measuring outcomes, unit of service, and quality of service. Data collection is looking at effectiveness-based program planning. All the effort put into the development of a program, hypothesis, goals, and objectives and design will mean little if the correct data are not collected, aggregated, analyzed, and reported. So again, it's important to make sure that everything is linking up to our goals and objectives and to the client outcomes. It's a very logical flow, just like with the logic model, as that helps to piece together this information. But it's important that every aspect of our program and its evaluation and measurement all connect. Data collection systems must be designed to answer questions about meeting community need, identifying diverse populations, measuring how much each has been helped, measuring the achievement of outputs and outcomes, and calculating the cost associated with process, output, and outcomes. It's important also that we consider things like monitoring information technology and how we're using that, monitoring how we're storing our data, etc. But effectiveness-based program planning requires computerized data management systems that are capable of producing information on the progress of clients throughout each episode of service, the effects of these services at termination and follow-up, and data elements can be collected, processed, and aggregated in a manner that informs both clinical staff and administrators. So again, as we think about program evaluation, effectiveness-based program planning produces information that informs staff on program success in relation to expectations expressed and objectives. Program evaluation information can bring together direct service staff, supervisors, managers, administrators, and board members around a common set of concerns and interests. Another piece that people don't always like to talk about, but budgeting as we're looking at our program and the planning of programs. All programs and services depend on funding for their startup and continuation. Most sources of funding do not guarantee the same level of support will continue throughout the life of a program. Oftentimes it's for a designated period of time. Clients and staff benefit when the best possible results are achieved in a cost-efficient and cost-effective manner. Well-designed budgeting systems are capable of generating critical information for making program changes that result in better quality services for clients at a lower cost. Other things to think about in terms of implementation, the culture and mindset of the organization itself, the commitment from organizational leadership to collect and use data to resolve client problems in the most effective and efficient way, available technological resources, and effective utilization of staff, volunteers, interns, etc. in pre-planning, defining, and implementing.